Table manners. So Suzanne, today our topic is table manners. Why don't we start our conversation off by talking about some of the common table manners that we follow in North America? Of course, you and I, we are both North Americans, right? I'm Canadian, you are American, and I think our table manners are pretty much exactly the same in the two countries. I mean, at least when I visited America, I've never noticed anything that's really different in regard to table manners. But Suzanne, you've lived in both countries, so maybe you have. Would you say they are pretty much exactly the same in that regard? Yeah, I really do think so. I think everyone washes their hands for sandwiches and things we use our hands, but for the most part, we use forks and knives and things like that. Napkins. So it's really generally the same, I would say. Yeah, I agree. I haven't noticed any differences. I haven't noticed any differences in regard to table manners between Canada and the USA. But that's not to say that there aren't some differences from other countries, right? I know in Europe and in Asia and Africa and India, all of these places have different etiquette and different rules around eating and what is polite and what is considered rude. So maybe we will start to just because we do have a global audience, we have listeners from all over the place. So maybe we should talk a little bit about what is polite in our culture, Suzanne. So, what kind of table manners come to mind when you think of this topic? What pops into your head? Well, definitely making sure that you wash your hands before you eat or that you before you come to a table. Maybe you're meeting a friend for dinner at a restaurant. I tend to excuse myself and say, you know what, I'm just gonna wash my hands real quick and make sure that I don't bring maybe the metro or whatever else I touched onto the table. I think that also going through the pandemic really helped to empathize having clean hands. I think I think that also going through pandemic really helped too. I think that also going through the pandemic. I think I think that also going through the pandemic really helped to empathize having clean hands. So that's definitely something that we do here and people do that's definitely something that we do here and people do put like the napkin or paper towel or whatever they give you on their laps a lot of times. Not everybody, but it's pretty common that people put things on their lap to protect their clothes. And just to kind of make sure that you don't drop any spaghetti sauce or anything like that on your lap. Yeah, especially someone who like me, who is kind of a messy eater, that is a must. Yeah, especially someone like me who is a kind of a messy eater, especially someone like me, especially someone like me who is kind of a messy eater, that is a must. Like me. I need to do that for sure, but I have to say that when it comes to putting a napkin or something on my lap, I usually only would do that at a restaurant. I don't usually do that at home. Do you ever do that at home? But I have to say that when it comes to putting a napkin or something on my lap, I usually only would do that at a restaurant. I don't usually do that at home. Do you ever do that at home? No, I don't. And I see people wear aprons like while they are cooking. I say that because I'm a messy cooker. I definitely splatter things and spill while I'm cooking because I just really love cooking and I get in the zone and I don't really think about all of the mess that is happening. And I see people wearing aprons at home and I don't do that and I have them and I should use them. I think I would be a lot happier because I wouldn't splatter my clothes as much. I wouldn't splatter my clothes as much. But I don't use napkins on my lap at home. Okay, it's funny that you were talking about being a messy cooker. I just actually had to throw out a couple of t-shirts because they got stained when I was cooking at home. When I was cooking at home, and I was saying to my wife, I need to buy an apron because I guess I'm also a messy cooker and I could protect and save my clothes. So it's just kind of funny that you brought that up. Brought that up. It's just kind of funny that you brought that up because I was just thinking about that the other day as well. Suzanne, one thing also that you said that kind of sparked a thought in my head was about washing your hands before coming to the table. Many listeners will know that I live in South Korea, and one thing that they do here in South Korea, which I really love, is they always give you a wet tissue when you come. They call it water tissue in Korean language. I don't know exactly what we would call it in English. Maybe a wet wipe. I don't know exactly what we call it in English. Maybe a wet wipe. They give you like a wet wipe when you come to the table to wash your hands at the table. I haven't really noticed too many restaurants in Canada that do that. But I think it's a great idea and it just is a nice way to make sure that you are spick and span before you enjoy your meal. That's wonderful. I remember my grandmother actually keeping some of those in her purse and hanging them to us as kids because kids have dirty hands most of the time. So yeah, that seems like a really good idea to kind of keep it in your bag or your backpack just in case. Just in case. Especially if you're traveling or on a backpacking trip somewhere, that could be a really good thing to take with you. Just in case. Just to be safe. When I think about table manners, the first thing that pops into my head is about how you actually deal with the food when you are putting it into your mouth. So, like when you are chewing and how you essentially behave when you've got food in your mouth, right? Like that part of the eating process. So being no-nos, in my opinion, for like being polite at the dinner table is never to chew with your mouth open, right? You want to keep your mouth closed so that you're not showing people what's inside your mouth. And also you don't want to be loud, right? The sounds that comes out of people's mouth when they chew with their mouths open, it's really just gross, right? It's gross. And also, one thing that can help with that is to not talk while your mouth is full, right? So if you take a bite, you know, and then someone asks you a question, it can be challenging. Maybe you say like, just 1 second, and you're finished chewing and then you can answer their question, because especially if you're out to dinner at a restaurant, you're there probably to have conversation. So you have to kind of time your conversation around your so you have to kind of time your conversation around your conversation around your bites of food, so that you don't spit any food out onto the table, so that you don't spit your food out to the table. Yeah, and another thing, Suzanne, is slurping. When you're eating your food, right? Like if you're eating pasta or noodles or soup, something in general, we want to try and keep the noises down. That's considered to be polite table manners in Canada. That's considered to be polite table manners in Canada. Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, Andrew, do you ever lift up your bowl to finish the end of your soup or drink the end of your soup? Is that something that you do? Yes, but okay, this actually comes into the different table manners when you're in public and table manners when you're at home, because I think at home I definitely do that. And I've lived in Korea for so long that I sometimes just go by the Korean way of doing things. And that's not like super rude to do that in Korea. Like I see people do that. And I was at a restaurant yesterday meeting my friend for lunch, and we had a little bowl of soup that was on the side with our main meal, and they didn't even give us a spoon, or there weren't spoon on the table. You were just expected to drink that little cup of soup right from the little bowl that it came with. So I do it at home, and I do it sometimes in Korea, but it's really like restaurant specific. And I think if I were in Canada, maybe I wouldn't do that. If I were at a nicer restaurant, I would think that's a little bit too much. Yeah, I hear you. I guess it depends on the restaurant. I asked because I asked because 그래서 이래서 물어본 거야. I asked because it's not something I ever did at home or in public. 내가 집에서나 공공장소에서 하는 게 아니라서 물어봤어. I asked because it's not something I ever did at home or in public. But Olivier, my partner, he does it. And they do that in France. And sometimes he does that in a restaurant as well. And I just always watch him like, I never do that. But I think it's fine. It's great. It kind of means like, I love it so much. I want to get every last drop. And it was just a question because it was just a question because it was something I noticed that I was not used to it was not used to it was just a question because it was something I noticed that I was not used to, but that seems totally acceptable. It was just a question. 그냥 물어본 거야. It was just a question because it was just a question. It was just a question because it was just a question because I asked because I asked because I asked because it was just a question because I like what you just said there, and that is that when you drink your soup, and especially I think we do this at the end, right? When it gets hard to scoop up and the soup with your soup with your spoon, usually that's when you start drinking it. It's not often that you get. It's not often that you get like a big hot steaming bowl of soup and just drink it right away. But when you're towards the end and it's more convenient to drink it, it does show it. It does show that it does show that you enjoy it, right? You're like really enjoying your meal, and that's something that I've noticed in Korea. There are some slight differences about what's polite at the table and what's rude at the table. And I think in both cultures generally you don't want to make too much noises or make too much noise or be disgusting with your eating. But I have noticed here in Korea that if people are eating a little bit louder or like slurping their noodles or maybe drinking their soup or something like that, it's kind of showing that you really are enjoying your meal. And people will comment like, wow, this guy is like really enjoying his food. Like, it must be so delicious. So, yeah, it's just kind of a different viewpoint, but it's interesting. And that's fascinating to they hear that they do that in France as well. Yeah, I think similar to my family, my Italian family, if you're eating it kind of fast, then it means that you are really enjoying it, right? Like it's so good. So you want to really just devour it. Whereas when I go to France, for example, they eat very slow. They take a bite, put down their fork and knife, chew it, chew it. Maybe look at you, listen to a story, take another bite, put down. Yeah, it's very slow, and that was something that I was surprised at when I first went to France and ate out a dinner or even at my mother-in-law's house. I was very surprised at how slow people ate and they don't have large portions. So they are literally savoring each bite in a smaller amount and in a slower pace. That's probably a much better way to eat in terms of like digesting your food properly and not overeating. I could also see that being a little bit uncomfortable, like if you're meeting your partner's parents for the first time or something like that, and you had to eat really slowly, like these tiny little bites and get the food down slowly. Depending on the social arrangement of the dinner party, it could be maybe more awkward. But I think, yeah, I'm not a doctor, but I would think that's a healthier way to eat than, sometimes the way that we do in North America. the way that we do in North America. Than the way that we do in North America, where we just eat a lot and we eat quickly. It's true, and I noticed also something different about the France, something different. And I noticed also something different about the France culture when we are out to dinner, because my family is American and Olivia's family is French, and we've had some instances over the past year where we've been together at dinner, and I noticed that they wait until everyone gets their food at the restaurant to begin eating. And this is not something that is in all of the North America as far as a cultural happening. Like most of us, don't wait don't wait until everyone is served, because the food is hot, and so we kind of go for it and just start eating. But with French people, they tend to wait till everyone is served, even if they are waiting like 5, 6, 10 minutes. So it can be a little shocking if you're like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have taken that bite. Sorry about that, everybody. If your food comes out first, then you might be put in a difficult situation. Totally. Now, you can pick on your French fries, that's okay. Okay, it's just like can dive into the main course. Totally, that's it. That's what I noticed. So, that's interesting because personally, maybe this was just like my family, but we always follow that kind of same system where we'd wait for everybody's food to be served, and it was always considered to be a little bit rude to jump in and start eating. Usually in the restaurant, the other people will feel kind of burdened that they are making you wait. The other person will feel burdened. 부담을 느낄 거다. Feel burdened. The other person will feel burdened. Feel burdened that 뭐뭐해서. The other person will feel burdened that they are making you wait. 기다리게 하면 되게 부담을 느낄 거야. So they will say, oh, just go ahead, tuck in, you don't have to wait for me. But without the permission of the other person, then it always felt a little bit rude. So I've always followed that as well, but that's caused some problem for me now that I'm living in Korea. Because usually in Korea, it's like the head of the family or maybe the head of a company, whoever is like the top dog in the line of the command. Once they start eating, then you can start eating. So, for example, when I meet with my wife's family, it's my father-in-law. He is kind of the head of the household. So once he starts eating, well, then we can follow after him. But often what happens when I go for dinner at my in-laws' place is that my mother-in-law will always be often what happens when I go for dinner at my in-laws' place is that my mother-in-law will always be just busy. My mother-in-law will always be just busy in the kitchen and she won't sit down at the table. She will still be like cooking and bringing food to the table and that kind of thing. And my father-in-law will just start eating and then I put in a difficult place because I think it's kind of rude to start eating. When my mother-in-law is still like cooking and preparing things. So I feel like I need to wait for her. But then my father-in-law will tell me, start eating, come on, let's go. So I'm kind of stuck in the middle of like my culture and Korean culture. And I don't know what is best to do. But obviously, since I'm in Korea, I try to follow the Korean rules, even though that gives me a slightly uncomfortable feeling. Yeah, I just thought of an idea. You could jump up and say, here, let me help you. And then maybe you can help her get to the table faster. So then, believe me, I've tried and I've tried and that doesn't fly either. I just get shooed away very quickly. But I like your thinking. I like that idea. Yes, Suzanne, how do you, yes. Suzanne, how do you feel about technology at the table? Oh, wow, good question. It's interesting because I think with the pandemic, a lot of restaurants had menus that are QR codes, so you needed your phone out, and some still do that. Where we went to a restaurant last week where we needed to have our phones out in order to look at the menu. And I don't love it. I kind of like keeping my phone I I kind of like keeping my phone away while I'm eating just to have a break from just have just to have a break from the no, just to have a break from the notifications and the distractions. Just to have a break from the notifications and the distractions. Just to have a break from the notifications and the distractions. Distractions. How about you, Andrew? What do you think? It's interesting that you brought that up because I was recently back in Canada and I noticed that at restaurants that suddenly on the table there are these QR codes and some restaurants won't give you a menu anymore. They just expect you to open the menu on your phone with the QR code. Yeah, I didn't love that. It felt a little bit impersonal. It felt a little bit personal. Impersonal. It felt a little bit personal to me. Yeah, I didn't love that. I didn't love that. It felt a little bit impersonal to me. Like it's nicer for the server to come and greet it like it's nicer for server to come and greet you and say hello and give you the menu. And also you've got a very good point there that it kind of forces you to take your phone out and deal with your phone right from the start, right? So if everybody in your party is taking out their phones and all looking at the menu, well, then you're not really having a social interaction with each other. So I can see how that could be handy. So I can see how that could be handy from the restaurant's perspective, but from my perspective, it's not that great. And in general, I think that's just a really rude thing to do is to be glued to your phone while you're dining with someone else. So I always try as best as I can not to look at my phone. I'm not perfect about that, and especially when your phone's in your pocket and you feel it vibrate and you've got a new message, like it's really tempting. But yeah, as much as I can, I try to leave my phone away from the table so it's not bothering me. And when I eat at home, I usually just put my phone in the bedroom or something while I'm eating dinner so that and when I eat at home, I usually just put my phone in the bedroom or something while I'm eating dinner so that I can have a conversation with my wife. It's like a really good time to connect and to speak with each other is when we are eating dinner or lunch together. So I try my best not to be one of those people that just eat and look at the phone the whole time. Look at the phone the whole time. Yeah, Olivia and I are not so good at keeping our phones away during dinner at home. Sometimes it's hanging out a little bit, but usually it's in the other room at least. But sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it is on the table near us and it's like, "Oh, don't look at it, you know?" So I hear you, but we usually watch a show like it's the only time we really watch TV is when we eat, which I realize is also just another kind of screen. And in a way, yes, we're connecting because we're both like laughing or looking at each other. And in a way, yes, in a way, in a way, yes, we're connecting because we're both like laughing or looking at each other and giggling about the show or whatever, but we're not talking about maybe a topic we need to talk about, like a project we're working on or a plan we want to put in action together. A plan we want to put in action together. So yeah, it's not the best. That habit is not a good table manner habit. I would say that my wife and I also started doing that actually pretty recently. We were really good for a long time about having zero technology at the table, but the iPad had somehow sneaked its way to the table, and we're like, should we watch a show? And then we started. The iPad had somehow sneaked its way to the table. The iPad had somehow sneaked its way to the table. But we don't do that all the time. But yeah, from time to time we do eat and actually every Thursday we do that to be specific because there's one show that we'd like to watch together. There's one show that we'd like to watch together comes out on Wednesday night and so we watch it at dinner. It's fun. I can't say there's anything wrong with it. Suzanne, I got one question here for you before we wrap up. And I don't know if you will have an answer for this or not, or if you want to share your answer about this question or not. But the question is, have you ever been in a situation where someone's table manners were so bad that it affected your enjoyment of your meal? It affected your enjoyment of the meal? Yeah. I would say there's two things that come to mind. One was when I was on an airplane, so that's kind of a little bit difficult because you're flying, you're eating out of these little containers. It's nice, it's not ideal to begin with. You're in a tight space, but one time I was sitting in the middle seat. Olivia was on the end, and there was a gentleman next to me. and he was talking to his friend across the aisle, and he was putting his face literally over my food, like just talking across me and Olivier to his friends on the other side of the aisle, and didn't care that I was like, I'm eating here. Yeah, excuse me, like personal space. So that was tough because you're kind of trapped. It's not like you can call the waitlist over or move to another table. It was like, okay, I'm stuck. Yeah, you got no out in the situation. You got no out. You got no out. You got no out in the situation. You just sort of had to deal with it. 그냥 감당해야 돼. 그냥 받아들여야 돼. You just sort of have to deal with it. Deal with it. You just have to deal with it. Yeah, and so I had to just say, excuse me, sir, like, can you please stop? Or you can switch seats with him if you want to speak with your friend. Like, you can change your seat. We'd happy to switch. You know, it was quite rude. So there was one, and another one was we were hosting friends at the time. Needless to say, they're not really friends of ours anymore, but at the time we had friends over for dinner, a few couples, and one of the guys between dinner and dessert just put his foot up on the table, his bare foot just up on the table, on the kitchen table, the dining table. Yeah, so we only have like one large dining table, and we were all sitting around the table, and we were digesting between dinner and dessert, and he just put his food. I was gonna say like as if it was his house, but to be honest, I wouldn't do that in my own house. It was it was all it was almost like he was alone watching Netflix, and he just put his foot on the table. Wow. I was like, oh my gosh, you're at somebody's house who just cooked you dinner. We were waiting for dessert. We were waiting for dessert. The dessert. The dessert. Dessert. The dessert. 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 We were waiting for dessert. 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 We are waiting for dessert. What are you doing? Like, nobody wants to smell your feet. Dessert. That's really interesting because I feel like that is just a no-no. Probably everywhere that's like a globally kind of acceptable thing that you want to try and keep the kitchen table, the dining table as clean as possible. And after you're walking around and then putting your feet on the table is like, yeah, wow, how did your guest react? I don't know. I mean, his girlfriend, well, it's his wife. Now it's his wife seemed to be okay with it. And then there were two other people there that kind of looked around at me. But everyone knew each other well, so I don't know if they were like, well, that's just him. Maybe they know that that's his personality, personality, personality. That's his personality. But for me, I was really offended. Yeah, I would be mortified in the situation. I would be mortified in the situation. Mortified, mortified, mortified. I don't know how I would react. I don't know how I would react. That's wild. That's a much more extreme story that I was expecting to hear, but it made me laugh. So I have to thank you for that. Yeah, I won't mention his name in case he's listening. I won't mention his name. I won't mention his name if in case he's listening. In case he's listening. We've decided to keep the conversation going. We've decided to keep the conversation going for just a little bit longer here for all of our members, just as a way to say thanks to all of you for supporting us. So Suzanne, I've prepared these rapid fire style questions for us to talk about here that are all related to table manners. And the first question, Suzanne, is have you ever been in a situation where maybe it's like a fancy dinner at a restaurant and they give you lots of different cutlery or utensils and you're not sure about how to use them or which one to use or in which order to use them? Have you ever run into that situation? For the most part, the basic two forks, spoon, knife, and like little spoon on top, which that I can pretty much figure out. I do recall like a small fork that's like really tiny that I was like, I don't know what this is for. I don't think I ever learned what it was for. I don't I don't know where I was. It might have even been a it might have it might have even been a it might have even been at a hotel, like at a British inspired high tea, and there was a small fork. It may have been for a jam. I honestly don't know. 솔직히 모르겠어. I honestly don't know. I don't know. 솔직히 모르겠다. I honestly don't know. I never used it. It just sat there. Just sat there. And I kind of just looked around and was like, oh well, I guess I will just ignore it. Not recently, but up until like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, was never that big of a seafood person. But that's changed. I've got into seafood in a big way over the last 4 or 5 years, but before that I wasn't. And I remember one of the first times that I ate lobster. I didn't really understand what all the utensils were for. Like I had it here in Korea, and I think actually I've never had lobster outside of Korea. So I don't know if it's the same in North America, but they gave me seizures and they gave me this big stick, like this big poking stick, and I had to ask my wife for help. I was like, what am I supposed to do with these seizures and this poking stick? But actually it seems like a really efficient It seemed like a really efficient way to eat the lobster. Like you just use the scissors to cut the shell. And then there's this stick. There's this stick so that you can poke the lobster meat out of the shell. But there was a situation where I really felt to use another seafood, kind of metaphor here. But there was a situation where I really felt to use another seafood, kind of metaphor here. Like a fish out of the water. Like a fish out of water. Out of water. Like a fish out of water. Like a fish out of water. I didn't know what to do, and I had to ask my wife to show me the ropes because I just didn't get it. And I have a question when we're talking about messy eater. Did you wear a lobster bib? I think I did, yes. Actually, it's really common also here in Korea for many restaurants to give you like a little bib. So because I'm one of those people who tend to drop food more often than I would like. More often than I would like. 생각보다 음식을 많이 흘리는 사람이라서. I'm one of those people who tend to drop food. I'm one of those people who tend to drop food more often than I would like. More often than I would like. More often than I would like. I pretty much always wear the bib just to be safe. 혹시 모르니까. Just to be safe. Yeah, that's great. Okay, rapid fire question number 2. Do you think it's necessary to have good table manners in informal settings, such as at home with family or with close friends? Is it okay to drop the formality a little? Is it okay to drop the formality a little bit and just go wild? Or should you have good table manners all the time? I think you can really relax your table manners at home and not to be so formal. But I think it could also be important to have a comfortability with maybe the roommates with the roommates you live with, or maybe your partner or friends, so that you aren't in any way. Well, let's put it this way. You're not putting your food up on the table, right? You're not offending. You're not offending anyone. You kind of maybe have the same level of comfortability and can enjoy a meal together without feeling like you have to be formal or that you feel grossed out or offended. So I think it's good to kind of be yourself in those situations. That's kind of how I live by, I guess. Yeah, I think the thing is, if you are hanging out with your family or close friends and you are doing something that bothers them, they are going to definitely tell you right away, like, hey, that's gross, like, cut that out, right? You can sort of easily find where the limits are. You can find 알게 될 거야. Where the limits are. You can find where the limits are in that kind of situation. And definitely, I think this is just natural. Everybody is a little bit looser when they're around their good friends. And, you know, if I'm hanging out with my buddies and we're eating pizza, I'm probably like laughing and joking around and not worrying about eating with my not worrying about eating with my mouth full. 아닌데. Not worrying about eating with my mouth closed. As much as I would be around practically everybody else in different situations. As much as I would be around practically everybody else. So there's, yeah, definitely a little bit of flexibility depending on your environment and context. Definitely a little bit flexibility. Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's do our final rapid fire question here. And I guess, Suzanne, you already actually answered this earlier. And the question is, how do you handle situations when someone at the table is not following proper etiquette or table manners? Do you say something or do you ignore it? And yeah, I think we know that you're just someone who would, yeah, I think we know that you are someone who would just voice your opinion and say, excuse me, could you not do that? Yeah, I even have a good friend who is like one of my best friends, and they do talk with their mouth full, and I don't think that they realize it in a way. It's something subconscious. They are just talkers. They love to talk and they continue doing it even while they are eating. And I have to say things to them all the time. I say, hey, you're talking with your mouth full. But I'm kind of in that second rapid fire question. I'm a very close friend, so I feel very comfortable telling them, you're kind of spitting your food out. Can you just finish eating? Can you just finish eating? It's cool, and they usually are like, oh my gosh, sorry. So I think if you feel comfortable with those close friends, it may be a little bit easier to tell them than if it's just an acquaintance or someone you've just met. That might be a little bit more difficult. Unless it's very overt and they are putting their feet on your table. I feel like that's definitely something you can say. Yeah, can you please put your foot down? Thanks. You're not 5 years old. I think I've never actually been in the situation where I've felt compelled to say something. Not that I would be against it, but I just haven't been in the situation. But I think if someone really push the limits about what is acceptable or unacceptable, then yeah, I would say something. And of course, when you're with your close friends, yeah, you can say like, hey, stop chewing those potato chips so loudly. Stop chewing it so loudly. Stop chewing them so loudly. It's annoying, but to strangers, it's harder, right? Thankfully, I've never really been in the situation where someone's annoyed me to the point where I have to say something. Well, Suzanne, that will bring us to the end of this bonus content. I want to thank everyone for listening and great job on completing an English study session here with Suzanne and I today. Well, and now we'd like to throw things over to you. You've heard what Andrew and I have to say about table manners, but we'd like to know what you think. So share your opinion with us and the Culips community by leaving a comment on your website, clilips.com on our website, clilips.com. Don't be shy, Andrew and I can't wait to hear from you. That's right. Okay, everyone, take care and we will talk to you next time. Goodbye.